I'm Olivia. I'm 40. And the brother who stole my parents' farm, my share of the inheritance, and my trust for the 100th time made one mistake. He forgot I was the daughter who stayed. The one who knew every person in this town. The one who remembered everything. This is a story about the good child who stops being good. About community as weapon and shield. And about the moment you realize that justice doesn't require a courtroom, it just requires witnesses. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories, where we tell quiet stories about families, about the debts we pay and the debts we collect, and about the strength it takes to stop being the person who always cleans up the mess. If a story ever made you feel less alone, that's why we're here. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's walk through this one together. Here's my story. The morning my father died, I was grading spelling tests. Not important spelling tests, the kind where because becomes because and friend becomes friend, and you circle the errors in red pen and wonder if anyone will ever need to spell correctly in a world with autocorrect. I was sitting at my kitchen table in the house I'd rented for 12 years, a small Victorian near the school, with a porch that sagged and a radiator that clanked and a view of the green mountains that made the low salary worth it. My phone rang. My mother's number, which I'd learned to dread. Not because she called with bad news, because she called with Ethan's bad news, which was always somehow my problem to solve. Olivia. Her voice was thin, the voice she'd had since my father's diagnosis 6 months ago. Lung cancer, stage 4, the kind that takes you slowly and leaves you gasping. He's gone. I set down my red pen. When, an hour ago, in his sleep, the hospice nurse is still here. I'll come. Olivia. She paused, and I heard the hesitation, the weight of whatever she needed to ask. Ethan isn't answering his phone. Of course he wasn't. Ethan was 35, unemployed again, probably somewhere with poor cell service and a bar tab. He'd visited Dad twice during the illness, both times when he needed money, both times leaving with checks and promises to come back soon. I'll find him, I said. After I come to you. You're a good daughter, my mother said. The phrase she'd used my entire life. The label that meant reliable and uncomplaining and available for whatever we need. I was the good daughter. Ethan was the sensitive one, the creative one, the one who needed support and understanding and second chances that multiplied like rabbits. I drove to my parents' farm. The Hartwell Farm, established 1892, 147 acres of Vermont hillside, dairy cows long sold, now mostly hay and a small orchard that my father had kept for sentimental reasons. The house was white clapboard, green shutters, a wraparound porch where my mother had shelled peas every summer of my life. I knew every board, every creak, every shadow that moved across the floor at 3 p.m. My mother was in the kitchen, sitting at the table with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking. The hospice nurse was packing equipment. Quiet, efficient, respectful of grief she'd seen 100 times before. Where's Ethan? My mother asked, before I could hug her, before I could cry, before I could process that my father was gone and I'd never again hear him call me Livy in the voice that made me feel 6 years old and completely safe. I'll find him, I said again. The promise I'd made 1,000 times. The promise that was never reciprocated, never acknowledged, just expected. I found him 3 days later, in Burlington, at a bar near the waterfront, drinking with a woman who looked younger than his excuses. He was drunk, belligerent, and broke, the trifecta of Ethan's existence. Dad's dead, I said, standing at his table. I know, he didn't look up. Mom called, left a voicemail. She needs you, the funeral, the arrangements. I'll be there. He waved his hand, dismissing me. I'll be there, Liv, don't worry so much. He wasn't there, not for the funeral planning, not for the viewing, not for the service at the Congregational church where we'd been baptized, where our parents had married, where the same organist played the same hymns for every Hartwell funeral going back 4 generations. He arrived at the gravesite, late, smelling of bourbon and something sweet, and stood in the back row while I held my mother's arm and pretended not to notice. That was April. By July, my mother was dead too. They called it broken heart syndrome. The medical term is stress-induced cardiomyopathy. The heart literally weakens from grief. My mother, who'd been healthy her entire life, who'd never smoked, rarely drank, walked 3 miles daily until my father's illness confined her to the house. She died in her sleep, 3 months after burying her husband of 42 years. I found her. Morning visit, routine check, the key under the ceramic frog by the door. She was in her bed, peaceful, the photo of my father on her nightstand, his reading glasses still on top of the book he'd never finished. I called 911, I called the funeral home. I called Ethan, he answered on the 3rd ring, voice thick with sleep. Liv, it's early. Mom's dead. Silence, then what? She died in her sleep last night. The paramedics are here. I need you to come. I'm in Boston. I can't just. Then don't. I hung up. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my brother. And I felt not guilty, not liberated. Just tired. The tired of someone who'd been carrying a weight so long they'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. Ethan came to the funeral. Sober this time, or better at hiding it. He hugged me, awkward, perfunctory. I'm sorry, Liv, I know you did everything. I did do everything. The second funeral in 3 months, the second round of condolences, the second time standing and receiving lines, accepting hugs from people who meant well but couldn't possibly understand. I did the paperwork, the estate notifications, the endless bureaucracy of death. I cleaned out my mother's closet, folding her sweaters, packing her jewelry, finding the letters my father had written her during their engagement that she'd kept for 40 years. Ethan helped after a fashion. He appeared for 2 days, sorted some papers, made some calls, disappeared again with a promise to handle the estate stuff that I knew meant nothing. But I let him, because I was drowning and any hand reaching out seemed like rescue. The farm was worth $1.2 million. I knew this because my father had told me once during his illness. The land's valuable, Livy. Developers have been sniffing around. Don't let Ethan sell it cheap, and don't let him keep it all. He'd never said that to Ethan. Never written it down. Just told me in a morphine haze, trusting me to remember, to enforce, to be the good daughter one more time. The will was clear, 50/50 split. Ethan and me, equal heirs, but Ethan had ideas. Liv, you're busy teaching. You don't have time to deal with real estate agents and developers and all that. Let me handle it. I'll get us the best price, split everything down the middle, you'll never have to worry. I should have said no. I knew Ethan's history, the business opportunities that failed, the investments that evaporated, the money he'd borrowed from our parents that was never repaid because he was trying. But I was exhausted. Grief does that, it narrows your vision, makes any path that promises relief seem reasonable. Okay, I said, but I want to see all the paperwork. Every offer, every contract. Of course, Ethan said, smiling the smile that had charmed our parents for 35 years. Total transparency, we're partners in this. We opened a joint account for the sale proceeds. Ethan insisted, easier for taxes, easier for distribution. I agreed because I was too tired to argue, too sad to be suspicious, too accustomed to being the accommodating one. The developer made an offer, $1.5 million. Above market, Ethan said. A can't-refuse deal. I signed the papers he put in front of me, not reading carefully, not questioning the fine print, just wanting the process to end so I could sleep. The money hit the account on a Friday. By Monday, it was gone. I checked online banking from my classroom during lunch break, expecting to see the balance that would change my life. The zeros stared back at me like an accusation. I called Ethan, voicemail, I called again. Voicemail. I called the bank, the lawyer, anyone who might explain what had happened. Ethan had transferred everything. Empty account, closed joint access, vanished. A friend from Burlington, the bartender who'd served him that night in April, told me he'd heard Ethan was in Las Vegas. Big plans, the bartender said he finally had real money to work with. I had $47 in my personal checking account, a mortgage on my Victorian that I'd taken to help my parents during my father's illness. Payments Ethan had promised to cover from the farm sale. A teaching salary of $42,000 a year, and the same farm I'd just sold, now owned by a luxury developer who planned 12 condominiums with mountain views and a spa. I sat in my classroom after the students left, the spelling tests still ungraded on my desk, and I felt something I hadn't felt since childhood. Rage, pure, cold, clarifying rage. I didn't call the police. Not because I was protecting Ethan, those days were over, but because I knew the legal system. Knew that financial crimes between siblings took years to prosecute, that Ethan would spend the money before a judgment came, that I'd be left with legal fees and a hollow victory. I needed something else. Something faster, something Ethan couldn't charm or lie his way out of. I started with the farm. The developer, a man named Richard Cole from New York who wore expensive suits and spoke in percentages, had already begun surveys. He'd cut down 3 apple trees for access roads. He'd posted no trespassing signs on land that had been open to the community for generations. The town was furious, but impotent. Cole had bought legally, paid cash, followed every regulation. What could they do? I went to the town clerk's office. Marge Henshaw, 70 years old, had held the position since before I was born. She knew every document, every deed, every hidden clause in the town's 200-year history. Olivia, she said, looking up from her desk. I'm sorry about your parents and about everything. Thank you, Marge. I need to see the original deed for the Hartwell farm. The 1892 document and any amendments. She frowned. That's in the archives, takes time to pull. I have time. She looked at me, really looked at me, and saw something different. The good daughter, the accommodating sister, the quiet teacher who never made demands. Gone. In her place, someone harder, hungrier, more focused. I'll pull them, Marge said. It took 3 days. I spent them in the archives, reading by fluorescent light, surrounded by the dust of centuries. The original deed, the transfers, the easements, the restrictions. My parents had added a clause in 1987 when they inherited from my grandfather. I'd never known about it. No one had ever needed to. Historical preservation restriction. It read. The property known as Hartwell Farm, 147 acres, shall not be subdivided for residential development exceeding 4 units. The property shall maintain agricultural or open space use in perpetuity. Any violation shall result in immediate reversion to the town of Hartwell, with compensation limited to the agricultural value of the land. Cole's 12 condominiums violated this clause. His purchase was legal, but his development was not. He was trapped owning land he couldn't use, paying taxes on a property worth millions that was legally worth perhaps $200,000 as farmland. I made copies. I highlighted the relevant language. I met with a lawyer, pro bono, a former student of mine who'd gone to law school and remembered the teacher who'd stayed late to help him pass English. She confirmed the clause was enforceable. Cole was stuck, but I didn't want to destroy Cole. I wanted to destroy Ethan's escape. I spent 2 weeks researching. Not Cole, Ethan. Through social media, through mutual acquaintances, through the credit card trail he'd left like breadcrumbs. I found him in Las Vegas, staying at a mid-tier casino hotel, gambling at tables he couldn't afford, running through my parents' legacy like water. I also found his debts. Not to banks, Ethan had burned those bridges, to private lenders. The kind that operated in cash in back rooms, in the gray spaces where legality was optional and collection was not. He owed $400,000, spread across 3 lenders, with interest compounding weekly. He'd used the farm money as collateral, promised repayment within 30 days of the sale. He'd been in Vegas for 6 weeks. The 30 days had passed. The lenders were getting impatient. I made calls. Anonymous from a burner phone using information I'd gathered. I told them where Ethan was, what room, what schedule, what debts he'd also hidden from them, the overlapping promises, the multiple loans. The classic Ethan pattern of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul until everyone realized there was no money. I didn't threaten. I didn't need to. These men, they were men, I learned, with names and reputations and businesses to protect, were professionals. They would find Ethan, they would have their conversation. And Ethan would understand, finally, that his charm had limits. Then I turned to Cole. I met him in the farm's orchard, what remained of it, the 3 trees already cut down, the stumps like wounds in the earth. He was nervous, sweating despite the October chill, a man who'd bet on a sure thing and discovered it was anything but. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, extending his hand. I understand you're the former owner's daughter. I'm sorry for your loss, but as you know, the property is legally. I know what it is, I said. And I know what it isn't. You can't build here, Mr. Cole, not 12 units, not 6. Not 1. The 1987 restriction limits you to agricultural use, and your purchase price assumed residential development. You're holding a $1.5 million asset that's worth $200,000, and the taxes you're paying are based on the $1.5 million valuation. Cole's face went gray. That's not possible. My lawyers reviewed everything. Your lawyers reviewed the sale. They didn't review the historical chain. The restriction was filed separately in the preservation records, not the main deed. An oversight, a costly one. What do you want? He was sweating heavily now, the expensive suit darkening at the armpits. I want to buy the farm back, at agricultural value, $200,000 paid over 20 years. I'll establish a community trust, maintain the land as open space, and you can write off the loss against your other developments. That's insane. I paid $1.5 million. And you'll never see that money because the land can't be developed and no one else will buy it knowing that. I'm offering you a way out, a small way but a way. The alternative is holding a worthless asset while paying taxes that will bankrupt you. He stared at me. Why? Why do you want it? You sold it. Your brother sold it. Because it was never mine to sell. Because my parents kept that land for 147 years, through depressions and wars and every temptation to cash out, because they trusted me to protect it and I failed, and because, I paused, feeling the weight of the words. Because my brother stole my share of the money and I can't get it back, but I can get the land back. I can make his theft meaningless, and I can do it without lawyers, without courts, without the years of waiting that would let him spend everything. Cole was quiet for a long time, then, your brother, where is he? Vegas. Gambling away your purchase price and his debts and everything else he can borrow. He'll be broke soon, if he's not already. And you don't care. I care about this farm, I care about this town. My brother stopped being my concern when he emptied our account and disappeared. Cole nodded slowly. I'll have my lawyer review your offer. Review quickly, because I'm not the only one who knows about the restriction. And once the town understands that you own land you can't develop, the pressure to revert it to public use will be significant. I left him in the orchard, surrounded by stumps and regret, and I felt the first flicker of something like power. Not happiness, not satisfaction, just the cold certainty that I was no longer the good daughter who waited to be rescued. The town meeting was my idea. Not a protest, not a confrontation, a community discussion about the future of the Hartwell farm. I booked the school auditorium, the one where I directed Christmas plays and graduation ceremonies and every school event for 15 years. I sent invitations to everyone, the mayor, the select board, the sheriff, the newspaper editor, the 200 families who'd known my parents, who'd bought apples from our orchard, who'd sledded on our hills. I didn't mention Ethan. I didn't mention Cole. I just said, please come, the farm's future affects us all. They came, 200 people filling every seat, standing in the back, spilling into the hallway. The mayor looking uncomfortable, the sheriff looking curious, the editor looking for a story. I stood on the stage, the same stage where I'd played Mary in the Nativity play at age 8, where I'd given my valedictorian speech at 18, where I'd stood as a teacher for 15 years watching other people's children grow. Thank you for coming, I said. My voice was steady, calm, the teacher's voice that commanded attention without demanding it. Many of you knew my parents. George and Martha Hartwell, who farmed this land for 40 years, who kept it open for the community, who believed that some things are worth more than money. Murmurs of agreement. Nods. The shared memory of a couple who'd been fixtures, reliable. Present? What many of you don't know is that my brother Ethan sold this farm 3 months ago to a developer from New York for $1.5 million. He took my share of the money and disappeared to Las Vegas. I was left with nothing. The room went quiet. Not shocked, many had suspected, gossip being the small town's currency, but quiet in the way of people hearing a truth spoken out loud for the first time. The developer, Mr. Cole, planned 12 luxury condominiums, a spa, a gated community, the end of open access, the end of the orchard, the end of everything my parents preserved. Anger now, muttering, the sheriff shifting in his seat. But there's something else, something Mr. Cole didn't know when he bought. Something my parents did in 1987 when they inherited the farm from my grandfather. I held up the document. The 1987 restriction, copied, enlarged, impossible to miss. A historical preservation clause. The land cannot be subdivided for residential development. It must remain agricultural or open space. Forever, the room erupted, not in anger, in something else. Hope, maybe, or vindication. The collective realization that the town had power, that the developer was trapped, that the farm could be saved. I held up my hand. Silence returned, gradual, expectant. I've offered to buy the farm back. At agricultural value, $200,000 over 20 years. I'll establish a community trust. The orchard will be replanted. The hills will remain open. The farm will be what it always was, a place for all of us, not a profit center for someone who doesn't live here. Applause. Sustained, genuine, the applause of people who'd felt helpless and suddenly weren't. But there's one more thing. I paused, feeling the weight of the moment. My brother is in Las Vegas. He spent most of the $1.5 million. He owes $400,000 to private lenders. He's hiding in a casino hotel, running out of money, running out of time. I looked at the sheriff. He was leaning forward, interested but not alarmed. This wasn't criminal, not yet, just information. I've provided his location to those lenders, not because I want him hurt, because I want him to understand, finally, that actions have consequences, that you can't steal from your family, from your community, and expect to disappear into the glitter of Vegas without the world catching up. The room was silent. Then someone, Tom Brennan, who'd gone to high school with me, who'd lost his own farm to foreclosure, laughed. Not cruelly. Just a laugh of recognition of someone who'd been burned by trust and understood the satisfaction of watching fire meet fire. Is that legal? Someone asked. It's information, I said, freely given. What others do with it is their choice. Just as what my brother did with my parents' legacy was his choice, and what I do with the farm now is mine. Ethan came back to Hartwell 2 weeks later, not with money, with fear, with a face I'd never seen before, the face of someone who'd learned that his charm, his excuses, his sensitive nature, had finally stopped working in a world that didn't know or care about his childhood trauma or his creative potential or his need for understanding. He came to my house, the Victorian with the sagging porch. He knocked and I opened the door and we looked at each other for the first time as what we really were, strangers who shared parents. Liv, he said. His voice was hoarse, tired, the voice of someone who hadn't slept well in weeks. I need help. I know, the lenders. They found me, they made things clear. He swallowed. I don't have the money, I spent it. I thought I could win it back, double it, prove I wasn't the loser everyone thinks I am. And now I owe more than I had, now I can't go back to Vegas, now I don't know what to do. I stepped aside, let him into my house. Not because I forgave him, not because I wanted to help him, because I wanted him to see what he'd destroyed and what I'd built in its place. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd graded spelling tests the morning our father died, where I'd planned the meeting that exposed him, where I'd become someone else. I bought the farm back, I said. From Cole, $200,000, 20 years, community trust, no condominiums, no spa, just the orchard, the hills, the open space. With what money you don't have, I don't. The trust has pledges from 80 families. $50 each monthly, enough to cover the payments. The town is paying for the farm, Ethan, because they want it, because they value it, because they show up for things that matter. He looked down at his hands. The hands that had signed the sale papers, transferred the money, disappeared. I could have been part of that. You could have, you chose not to. I was scared, Liv. Scared of being trapped here, scared of ending up like Dad, working the land until it killed him. I wanted to be someone. You wanted to be someone without becoming anyone. Without work, without commitment, without showing up when it was hard. You wanted the reward without the effort. And when you got money, you treated it the same way, as something to spend, not something to build. He was crying now, real tears, not the performative ones I'd seen at our parents' funerals. What do I do? I don't know, I honestly don't know. But I know what you don't do. You don't come here asking me to fix this. You don't call me the good daughter and expect me to rescue you. You don't use our shared grief to manipulate me into saving you from your own choices. I wasn't trying to manipulate. Yes, you were. It's what you do. It's what you've always done, and I'm done being manipulated. I stood up, walked to the door, opened it. There's a clinic in Nevada, I said. For gambling addiction, the lenders, they recommended it. Part of their rehabilitation approach. You could go there, get help, actually do the work of becoming someone. And if I don't, then you keep running, keep borrowing, keep burning bridges until there's nowhere left to stand. And one day you'll call me again and I'll hang up again because I'll be busy with my life, my community, my farm, the things you could have had if you'd stayed. He stood, walked to the door, stopped, looked back. I never meant to hurt you, Liv, I never thought about you at all. I know, I said, that's the worst part. He left, I closed the door, leaned against it, feeling the wood solid against my back, and I breathed. For the first time in months, I breathed without the weight of Ethan's needs, Ethan's crises, Ethan's endless emergencies. The farm is a trust now. Hartwell Community Land, 147 acres, open to everyone. We replanted the orchard, 50 trees, varieties my father loved, McIntosh and Cortland and the heirloom Gravensteins that barely exist anymore. We hold a harvest festival every October, a tradition my mother started in the 1980s, revived now with 300 people, cider pressing, hay rides, the same bluegrass band that played at my parents' anniversary parties. I don't live there. I still have my Victorian, my classroom, my life in town. But once a month, I walk the property. I check the trees, the fences, view of the mountains that hasn't changed in 147 years. And I feel something I never had before, ownership that isn't possession, stewardship that isn't sacrifice. Ethan is in Nevada. In the clinic last I heard, 6 months sober, working construction, paying his debts slowly. He writes occasionally, letters, not emails, the old-fashioned kind that arrive in envelopes with stamps. I don't write back. Not because I'm cruel. because I don't know what to say. Because I forgive you would be a lie, and I hate you would be incomplete, and the truth is too complicated for a letter. I keep his letters in the same drawer as my father's reading glasses and my mother's engagement letters. Evidence of what was, what could have been, what will never be. Last month I got a letter from one of the lenders. Not a threat, a thank you. Your brother is paying, it said. Slowly, but paying. The clinic helped. Your information helped. Sometimes people need to hit bottom to find the floor. I didn't reply, but I kept the letter, because it confirmed something I'd learned, that justice doesn't always look like punishment. Sometimes it looks like consequences, like falling, like the hard, ugly work of climbing back up without the net you assumed would always be there. That's my story. If you've ever been the good child who got nothing for your goodness, hear me. Your goodness isn't the problem. Your silence is. The world doesn't reward the people who suffer quietly. It rewards the people who show up, who speak up, who build communities that can hold them when family fails. I'm Olivia. I'm 41 now. I teach third grade. I administer a community land trust. I have $47 in my checking account most months because the farm payments come first and the trust pledges cover them, but there's never much left over. And I have something better than money. I have a town that knows my name, a land that bears my family's history, and a life that belongs to me completely, finally, because I stopped waiting for permission to claim it. See you in the next story.